Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, a shocking survey has revealed that 1 million adults in the UK went an entire day without eating in the past month, as a nationwide cost of living crisis is running deeper in one of the world's wealthiest countries. Professor Prem Sikka, a sitting member of the UK's House of Lords, will be joining me for his insights on how Britain has got to such a serious state of emergency. And Goldman Sachs recently stated that Bitcoin could rival gold to become an alternative safe haven for investors because it has the potential to reach $100,000 within the next 4 years. Is this likely? I'll be asking the founder and CEO of Digital Scouting, Dr. Robin Kira, who will be joining me from Hamburg. Then later, I'll be speaking with Glenn Hodgson, the CEO of think tank Free Trade Europa, about new legislation that could lead to significant changes for gig economy workers. But first, as always, let's start the show with news from here in the UK, where earlier in the week, former Conservative Prime Minister Sir John Major joined the growing calls of criticism against Boris Johnson over the loss of trust regarding the Partygate scandal that has engulfed Downing Street. One senior Tory donor described the Prime Minister's premiership as being past the point of no return, as smears Johnson made against the opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, have added even more strain to his already embattled tenure.
At number 10, the Prime Minister and officials broke lockdown laws. Brazen excuses were dreamed up. Day after day, the public was asked to believe the unbelievable. Ministers were sent out to defend the indefensible, making themselves look gullible or foolish as they did so. Collectively, this has made the government look distinctly shifty, which has consequences that go far beyond political unpopularity.
Earlier, I spoke with our business correspondent Simon Pusey for some analysis. Simon, the Prime Minister's troubles are not going anywhere. Earlier in the week, one senior Tory donor said his premiership is past the point of no return. Is that true?
Yeah, I think there's every day and every week there's more and more issues for the Prime Minister. He reportedly recently said it would take an army of tanks to get him out of 10 Downing Street, so it shows just how determined he is to stay. But like I said last week, I think we're going to reach this 54 mark at some point. A lot of MPs, I think, waiting for the Met Police to come out with their findings around Partygate, because obviously the previous investigation hasn't been released in full, and they're sort of hedging their bets there. But in the meantime, which could be weeks or months, there's going to be more and more scandal. Prime Minister's questions, an MP got up and said, well, what about this latest photo that's been released? And there's going to be so many more photos like this. The one doesn't look great. It's Boris Johnson in the 10 Downing Street, surrounded by tinsel. There's a bottle of champagne there, and he's surrounded by several other people there. And there's going to be more and more of these photos. Dominic Cummings tweeting there's way better pics than that floating around, including in the flat. So every day that Boris Johnson survives, there's just going to be more things. And it's not just around this story either. There's also, the issue of him saying that Keir Starmer failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile, and then a couple of days ago, Keir Starmer is surrounded on the street, and a lot of people saying those two things are linked. The fact that people are heckling him and accusing him of not prosecuting Jimmy Savile, and that Boris should apologise for that, which he's refused to do. There's just going to be more and more things that are going to come out of the woodwork, because there really is momentum now, which is really hard to stop, to try and remove Boris Johnson from pretty much all quarters. Even people in his own party are saying he should go. And so I don't think it does just stop with these parties, but I think there are 300 photos submitted to the Met Police. There's going to be worse pictures than the one that was released today. And I just think it's a real struggle for him to be able to govern. A couple of days ago, he had to cancel a phone call with Vladimir Putin. These are really important issues that he needs to get straight. The cost of living, the energy prices, gas prices rising. There's so many things that he should be focused on, but obviously he's not. And last week, 4 of his advisors left, one of them surrounding that Jimmy Savile slur, and he wasn't going to remove her. She had been around him for a long time. So I think it's increasingly hard for Boris. He's looking more bullish than ever, really, in the Commons, and he's attacking back. But I think as every day passes, there'll be new scandals, new photographs coming out, and I think inevitably we will have that vote, and 54 letters will go into the Conservative Party.
Let's wait and see. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Now to our next topic. A shocking survey has revealed that 1 million adults in the UK went an entire day without eating food in the past month because they struggled to put food on the table. This is according to a study by the Food Foundation think tank. Britain's inflation soared to a 30-year high in December 2021, and the upward trend has since continued, with the sharp rise in costs being passed on to consumers and household expenses surging. A nationwide cost of living crisis is running deeper, adding to the financial woes facing low-income families. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Professor Prem Sikka, a sitting member of the UK's House of Lords. Lord Prem Sikka, what an absolute pleasure it is to have you on Channels Business Global. Thank you so much for taking out time from your schedule to speak to us today. A pretty serious topic, and according to the Food Foundation think tank, shockingly, 1 million adults over the past month in the UK, not across Africa, have gone without food for an entire day due to the cost of living crisis that's currently taking place in this country. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's terrible news. It is not only 1 million people skipping meals. We have about 6 million people who are experiencing fuel poverty. They can't afford to pay for their gas and electricity bills. And that is, we have to remember that is happening in one of the richest economies on this planet. And all of this is totally avoidable.
Lord Sikka, how did we get here? We have viewers across the world, but for our viewers, particularly in Nigeria, they will be shocked because we know that Britain is a G7 nation. We all see the reports of people every day risking their lives to get here. Yes, the world understands we've been through a pandemic, but for somebody who is as esteemed as you, as knowledgeable as you, could you explain how we got here?
Well, we got here because of wrong government policies. Just look at the energy costs. The UK is increasing domestic bills by 54%, France by only 4%. One reason for that is that the UK privatized gas electricity bills, whereas France still has public ownership. Therefore, the government has more levers to pull and protect people. So here we handed it all over to private companies, and the result is what? Well, we have to remember UK won nature's lottery in the form of North Sea oil and gas. UK collects about $1.72 for each barrel of oil in tax. Norway collects $21.35. Because it did not hand it all over to the private companies. And we also have to remember there is profiteering. People are talking about the hike in energy costs to the people, but we have to remember that the cost of producing gas and electricity has not changed. It is exactly the same as before. What has changed is the price which people are being charged. So we have oil companies who in the last decade, this is before the current hike, had already paid out £200 billion in dividends. Now that is excessive profiteering. For all we know, there are cartels. Nobody's really looking at this. And then when we look in this country on the tax side, because tax in a sense can help to redistribute income and wealth. So under the current government, the position we have is that the poorest 10% of the households are paying 47.6% of their income in direct and indirect taxes, whilst the richest 10% are only paying 33.5%. So what the government has done is shifted taxes away from the rich to the poor. There are vast swathes of income which are not taxed at all, or are taxed at an incredibly low rate. And this is all the outcome of deliberate government policies because they want to attract what they say so-called entrepreneurs, big corporations. But no big corporation can survive or thrive if people don't have good disposable income, because without that, they can't buy goods and services.
Thank you for that thorough context there. And you're right, there have been calls this week after BP posted bumper annual profits for a windfall tax. Not sure if we're likely to get that. We're running out of time, sadly, though we definitely want to have you on again. I do want to ask about your thoughts on protests which are going to be held up and down the country this week for people to voice their anger against the government. Silly question, but I'll ask you anyway. Do you believe the Chancellor could do more? There were suggestions that perhaps the hike in NI tax in April should be axed, although we know the NHS need the money.
NHS can be funded in a whole variety of ways. Just to give you an example, capital gains, which are made by the wealthy people, at the moment, they are taxed at a range of 10 to 28%, whereas the earned income is taxed at the range of 20 to 45%. Just by taxing capital gains at the same rate as earned income raises extra £17 billion a year. Crisis is over. So the government has lots of options when it chooses not to. As regards protests, I would encourage people to engage in peaceful protests. No right has ever been won by simply sitting at home. People do have to have their voices heard. And indeed, last week I joined a protest of pensioners. And indeed, I have led a march of pensioners because they are in absolute trouble in this country.
Well, Lord Prem Seeker, so insightful to speak with you. We've certainly got to get you in the studio next time. Thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. Thank you very much. Let's change gears now. Gold has always been considered as investors' best bet against inflation, but could Bitcoin become a viable alternative? The emergence and maturity of cryptocurrencies has created a new global asset group, which, like gold, can be used as an asset haven for those seeking long-term investment. Goldman Sachs recently stated that Bitcoin could rival gold as it possesses the potential to reach $100,000 within the next 4 years. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by the founder and CEO of Digital Scouting, Dr. Robin Kira, who joins me from Hamburg. Dr. Robin Kira, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. There's something about central bank governors and cryptocurrency. On the one hand, they're adopting it. On the other, they shun it. It's only right, considering you are known for your kind of anti-establishment views, that I ask you a rule-breaking question, which is, could Bitcoin become the new gold in terms of being a safe haven for people that want to protect their assets?
The big question is, can we look into the future? I cannot look into the future, but there are a lot of indicators that say people are using or going to Bitcoin to store value. This has maybe not so much to do with gold, but which has more to do with low interest rates and actually the chaos that can be expected in the financial world due to the inflation we see around the world, which has to do with all the corona and COVID measures by governments. So I strongly believe it has a future, but how far it's going to go, I cannot say. But that there is a need for a function to store value, I think we have seen this over the past month that that's actually the case.
Absolutely. It's a shame you don't have your crystal ball on you today. We'll have to come back to you later in the year for you to bring it out from under your desk. It's interesting you say that lots of people are now using Bitcoin to store their money. But then on the other hand, we are starting to see so many companies, especially lots of these new digital age companies that are offering Bitcoin as a transaction option for their consumers. I know that you regularly advise lots of these successful entrepreneurs. Is that something you would advise them? Would you advise them that, yes, offer this for your consumers, the option to pay via Bitcoin? But the problem is you probably won't be able to get your money out soon.
I strongly believe you need to do whatever the client, whatever the customer wants. And if we see that customer wants to pay with crypto, then it's, I think, a good thing for entrepreneurs to lower the barrier of payment, to lower friction, and actually offer whatever the client wants.
Dr. Robin Kira, founder and CEO of Digital Scouting. Thank you so much for your insights and for joining me on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be speaking with Glenn Hodgson, the CEO of think tank Free Trade Europa, about new legislation that could lead to significant changes for gig economy workers. Plus, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest company news stories of the week. See you after the break. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a few minutes, I'll be speaking with Glenn Hodgson. But before then, here's some company news for you. A new coin celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee anniversary is launched in the United Kingdom. Some 1.3 million 50p coins, valued at just over £5 million, are being made available on limited release at UK post offices. Sites in Windsor and Sandringham were among the first branches to receive the new coin in honour of the Queen's 70-year reign. The meal delivery firm Just Eat Takeaway has announced that it will be delisting its shares from the Nasdaq Stock Exchange in a bid to limit costs and regulatory burdens. The group moved into the American market last summer, following the $7.3 billion acquisition of US delivery firm Grubhub. Bosses have come under pressure from investors to sell part of its operations as increased orders during the pandemic have begun to fade. Shares will remain listed on the Amsterdam and London stock exchanges. Toyota has posted profits of $6.8 billion for the 3 months to December, beating analysts' expectations despite the global chip crunch and a pandemic-driven parts shortage which forced production cuts. The Japanese auto giant said it now expects to make 500,000 fewer vehicles in its current financial year. Toyota is the world's largest car maker, and the group's efforts to bolster profitability through cost-cutting has been aided so far by high demand for its cars in their key markets of China, Europe and America. The European Union are working on plans to improve the conditions for the growing number of gig economy workers that could reclassify some as employees entitled to benefits. The proposed new rules are considered by some as a setback for digital platforms that rely heavily upon independent contractors to deliver food and offer rides. App-based gig work platforms like Bolt and Deliveroo provide short-term work for millions of people, but their rampant growth has upended traditional labour models, resulting in a clash between companies and regulators around the world. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Glenn Hodgson, the CEO of think tank Free Trade Europa. Glenn joins me from Stockholm. Glenn Hodgson, it's always a pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global. It's been quite a while, but the same issues with the platform economy or the gig economy persist. But now the European Commission are really trying to tackle it. They intend to ensure that those who work via these digital labour platforms receive an employment status that corresponds to their actual work performance. Why do you think this is important?
I think it's very important that workers are classified in the right way and that basically they have the access to social security, protection, financial services, all the things that sort of individuals in society have the right to, and not to be seen as second-class citizens because of the fact they've chosen to work in maybe a new way, which is not sort of synonymous with the traditional 9 to 5 selling hours 5 days a week, but to have more flexibility, more choice, and more opportunities. But they shouldn't be penalised for that either. So we're talking about a sort of an increasing group of population. We talk a lot about sort of ride-hailing and quick commerce delivery riders, but we're also talking about more independent and freelancers, all the way from lawyers, architects, to models and musicians. And I think this is something that we should take into account as the world of work changes.
Absolutely, a really interesting point actually that you're bringing other services, because it's not just people that deliver your pizza or a takeaway, whichever you prefer. But I think big tech has clearly become public enemy number one over the past couple of years. We know that their services have increased greatly as consumer habits changed during the lockdown, but we can't forget that they employ millions of people. They've brought lots of people out of low privileged backgrounds or unemployment. So do you not think that they need to be respectfully brought along in discussions rather than penalised, rather than chastated and criticised when they are offering an alternative to having no work?
Absolutely, and it needs to be part of the discussion. It needs to be a spirit of collaboration and partnership that the new framework, the new rules are built. Because as you say there, Juliana, they are creating jobs, creating opportunities. And we hear a lot about sort of the big tech giants, but there's also a lot of SMEs, there's a lot of startups within this space as well, who are looking at gaps in the marketplace, looking for opportunities and creating products and services to actually meet this need, to meet this gap, and that a lot of consumers are actually sort of really benefiting from. So I think this is absolutely crucial. And equally important is the workers themselves, the individuals who are in this space, the freelancers, to make sure that their voice is heard, that they're protected, they're covered, but also they're listened to in terms of the world of work changing to their needs as well.
Absolutely. I know that Free Trade Europa, the think tank that you head, has been delving into this topic over the past couple of years. And of course, you started discussing this before the pandemic. So you've obviously seen the changes. What are things like in Stockholm? Because as you said, you know, there are individuals, there are freelancers that actually enjoy the flexibility. I'm sure not everybody wants to be doing what we do, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, ticking the boxes. You know, lots of people have been working from home now. There are so many new hybrid ways of working. Do you think these individuals that everybody is trying to fight for want to be fought for?
Well, I think this is a fundamental question. People, whether it's politicians, whether it's platforms, whether it's trade unions, are discussing about these topics. But the big missing factor in all this is the actual workers themselves, not listening to the individuals who have actually made this choice. And I think this is the next big step that we have. Through our work, we're working with a lot of freelancers, a lot of individuals who have chosen this as a lifestyle choice as well as an employment choice. And we hear some great stories back from this in terms of wanting something different out of the workforce, the sort of the changing concept of a job, as well as individuals who want to do several things in parallel. Some it's just a traditional job and a side gig, side hustle. Others who want to use this as a way of living and a way of earning money. And I think this is something that we see that is increasing with remote work, of course, through the pandemic, and the fact that sort of people will not go back to an office crammed in 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. People want something more out of that, and technology is making it possible. New services and products are making it possible too, that we can have our cake and eat it, if you will, Juliana.
Some of us can, Glenn, some of us can. Before I let you go, you're talking about how the industry is evolving. There are now lots of third-party agencies who are rushing to take on the admin. I know that Deliveroo have kind of given off or sold off parts of their administration services so that they can make sure that workers are being looked after. Do you think that's the only viable solution, or are there other alternatives rather than dragging the Silicon Valley CEOs in front of EU lawmakers to make them, do their job correctly?
Yeah, I think it's also it's a journey, it's a process, and sort of developing all the time. Failing quickly is one of the typical Silicon Valley statements that come through. But I think it's important that this continues to evolve, continues to develop, and continues to change, Juliana. I think it's absolutely crucial that the business models change. And if there are companies and services who are willing to take away the hassle, the stress, and the headaches for a fee, then I think this is all part of the development as well. The same way that everyone can do their own taxes or clean their own apartment, but if you have the choice, you can also pay someone to actually take a bit of the load off your shoulders as well. And I think this is the same development that we're seeing in the platform economy and the freelance sector as well.
Absolutely. Last mile logistics is booming on the African continent. Glenn Hodgson, the CEO of Free Trade Europa, always a pleasure to have you, and I look forward to seeing you next time next to me in the studio in London. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Likewise. Thank you, Juliana.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.